Captain Leela Crew stood at the helm of the Mistral, staring out into the vast expanse of the Vantros Expanse. A barely charted region of space, the Expanse was notorious for its unpredictable anomalies, hostile environments, and limited star maps. It wasn't the ideal place for a warship, but humanity had little choice. The outermost colonies of the human race needed defending, and Lila was the commander tasked with that responsibility. The Mistral wasn't the biggest or most advanced ship in the fleet, but it was hers, and under her command, it had become a symbol of resilience. The ship had been through many battles, surviving time and again through Leela's quick thinking and the crew's unwavering loyalty. But this mission was proving more challenging than the others. A series of mysterious raids by an alien species known as the Ixethians had left several of humanity's colonies devastated. No one knew exactly why the Ixethians were targeting humanity, but Lila had a feeling it wasn't just about resources. As the Mistral limped through the Vantros Expanse, Lila's mind raced. The mission had been simple: investigate the raids, gather intelligence, and provide defense for the colony world of New Galith. But then everything had gone wrong. A surprise Ixethian attack had torn through the Mistral's hull, leaving the ship badly damaged. Now, they were stranded in the Expanse, with limited resources and no way to communicate with the rest of humanity. Leela's crew was doing their best to repair the ship, but every attempt to fix the core system seemed to lead to more problems. The Mistral's engines were offline, weapons were malfunctioning, and communications were down. Worse yet, the Ixethians hadn't stopped pursuing them. It seemed as though the aliens were intent on wiping them out, but the reason remained unclear. Leela's mind wandered back to the most troubling thought. Why were the Ixethians hunting them? There had been no clear provocation. The Ixethians had been raiding colonies for months, but the attacks didn't seem to be about territorial expansion. They were targeting humanity specifically and in ways that were calculated and precise. It wasn't just a military campaign, it felt personal. Just as Leela was about to give the order to recheck the ship's defenses, the Mistral's AI Lex beeped urgently. The voice of Lex was calm, as always, but the urgency in its tone caught Lila's attention. "Captain, there is a transmission incoming. It's strange." Leela turned to face the console, her eyes narrowing. She hadn't expected any communication, not in this desolate part of space. The transmission was garbled, fragmented. Lex did a quick analysis and then pulled up the details. The source of the transmission was unmistakable. It came from the Sagan, a human ship that had been lost 50 years ago, presumed destroyed in a long-forgotten campaign. No one had heard from the Sagan in decades, and its disappearance had remained one of the great mysteries of humanity's exploration. Leela's heart skipped a beat. What could the Sagan have left behind? "Play it, Lex," she ordered. The transmission crackled, broken into pieces as the message struggled to be heard through the static. Despite the damage, Leela could make out a few words, just enough to make her pulse quicken. There was talk of an artifact, an ancient, powerful object hidden within Ixethian territory. The message was fragmented, barely coherent, but it was clear that this artifact was something of immense value, valuable enough that the Ixethians had been searching for it for years. "Captain, I've decrypted part of the transmission," Lex said. "There's a set of coordinates, an unknown region of space." Leela frowned. "Coordinates?" "Yes. The artifact is hidden deep within Ixethian territory," Lex continued. "The Sagan crew believes it could change the balance of power in the galaxy." Leela's mind raced. A game-changing artifact. Could it be true? Could this be the key to ending the Ixethian threat once and for all? She knew that the Sagan had been lost while exploring regions near Ixethian space, but never had they expected to stumble upon this. Could humanity use this mysterious artifact to level the playing field? But at what cost? "We're close to the coordinates, Captain," Lex said, interrupting her thoughts. "Should we pursue them?" Leela hesitated. The decision wasn't easy. The Mistral was already damaged beyond repair, and the Ixethian fleet was closing in. They could leave the sector and return to human-controlled space for reinforcements, or they could risk everything to follow the coordinates and discover what the Sagan had left behind. The crew was divided. Lieutenant Kessler, the ship's tactician, argued they should retreat. There was no reason to risk their lives for an artifact they didn't even understand. But Commander Alvarez, the ship's science officer, was all for investigating the coordinates. He believed the artifact could be the key to tipping the scales in humanity's favor. Leela was torn. If they left, they might escape the Exethian threat for now. But the thought of the artifact, something that could potentially shift the balance of power, gnawed at her. If it existed, if it was real, they couldn't leave it behind. Before Lila could make her decision, Lex's voice filled the bridge once again. "Captain, I'm detecting a large Exethian fleet. They've been tracking us. They know about the transmission. They're moving in quickly." A chill ran down Lila's spine. The Exethians weren't just after their ship anymore, they were hunting the information they carried. The Mistral had become a target, not because of its strategic value, but because of the secrets it now held. Lila's gaze hardened. The decision was made. "Set course for the coordinates. Full speed ahead," she ordered, her voice steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. "We're not running. We're going after that artifact." As the Mistral surged forward into unknown territory, Lila couldn't help but wonder what they would find. What had the Sagan discovered? And what would the Exethians do if they found them first? Captain Lila Crew stood at the bridge of the Mistral, watching as the ship's systems calculated their approach to the coordinates. The star system ahead was uncharted, its once prominent star now a dim, flickering ember in the distance. According to the fragmented transmission from the Sagan, this was the location of the artifact that could change everything, the key to humanity's survival against the Exethians. But as the Mistral moved closer, something didn't sit right with Lila. A nagging feeling tugged at her as they neared their destination. Lex, the ship's AI, chimed in with a report. "Captain, we are entering Exethian-controlled space. I am detecting no signs of active defense systems, but the area is..." "Unusual? Unusual how?" Leela asked, her gaze narrowing. "There are no recorded star charts for this area." "The nearest planetary system is over 100 light-years away," Lex responded. "However, I am detecting a large, derelict structure ahead. It appears to be an Exethian warship, long abandoned." Leela's heart skipped a beat. They had expected to find a hidden artifact, something that could shift the balance of power between humanity and the Exethians. But instead, they were approaching a ghost ship. She turned to her crew, her mind racing. What were they walking into? "Zane, I need your team to prep for a boarding operation," Lila ordered, her voice calm but firm. "Everyone else, get ready for anything." Zane Kester, her first officer, stepped forward. His sharp features and cold gaze always seemed to reflect his willingness to push limits, something Lila had come to respect, even if she didn't always agree with him. "We'll be ready, Captain." As the Mistral docked with the derelict warship, the eerie silence of the abandoned vessel seeped into the crew's consciousness. The Exethians had always been known for their brutal efficiency, but this ship was different. It was colossal, built for war, yet it had been abandoned as if it had failed its purpose. The lights were dim, and the air was thick with the smell of long unused machinery. Leela led the boarding party through the darkened corridors of the ship, her steps echoing in the quiet halls. The Exethian technology was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, sleek, metallic, and ominous. But what had happened here? Why had they left this ship behind, stranded in the deep recesses of space? Inside the ship's command center, Leela's heart raced. A row of dormant terminals flickered to life as the crew accessed the ship's data. Lex worked swiftly to bypass the encrypted systems, but it was clear that whatever secrets the Exethians had left behind, they had made sure to hide them well. "Captain, I've accessed a portion of their databanks," Lex reported, its tone flat but precise. "It seems the Exethians were conducting..." "Experiments? Experiments?" Leela repeated, stepping closer to the screen. "What kind of experiments?" The data was patchy, but Lex managed to reconstruct a few fragmented logs. It appears they were experimenting with evolution. Not biological evolution, but a technological one. They were manipulating space-time, experimenting with time dilation, and enhancing their species through advanced alien artifacts. There are references to unstable quantum anomalies, and the data suggests they use these artifacts to accelerate their own evolution at the cost of destabilizing their civilization. Leela's mind raced as she absorbed the implications. The Exethians were not simply trying to improve their technology, they were trying to evolve beyond their natural limitations, to enhance themselves at the most fundamental level. But the results were disastrous. These experiments had left behind a dangerous anomaly, a tear in space-time that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality. The artifact from the Sagan, Lila muttered to herself. It wasn't just about power, it was about survival. They wanted to evolve, and humanity got in their way. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Humanity had never been the target of the Exethians' aggression because of resources or territory. No. The Exethians had been hunting them to prevent them from uncovering their experiments, because if humanity found out, they might learn to manipulate the same technology and, ultimately, challenge the Yixethian supremacy. Leela stood in the darkened command center. Over her. If the Exethians could accelerate their evolution through these artifacts, what would stop humanity from doing the same? Was the key to survival in manipulating this very technology? Could they harness it and become stronger, or would they risk falling into the same trap the Exethians had? Captain, Zane spoke, his voice breaking through her thoughts. We found something else. Leela turned to find Zane and his team gathered around a large sealed chamber. After a few moments of careful examination, they managed to open the door. Inside was a strange, glowing object, an alien artifact, pulsing with energy. It was the kind of thing that could change everything. But it was not the only thing in the chamber. On the far side of the room, a strange device hummed to life, its machinery whirring ominously. It was clear that whatever the Exethians had left behind, it was not just technology, it was a weapon. A weapon that could reshape the galaxy or destroy it. Leela's gut twisted as she realized the magnitude of their discovery. She had hoped to find a solution, something to help humanity fight back. But what they had uncovered was something far more dangerous than she had imagined. The crew gathered around the artifact, each of them silently grappling with the implications of what they had found. Some, like Zane, were eager to use it. Others, like Chief Engineer Sarai Hall, were filled with dread at the thought of wielding such power. What are we supposed to do with this? Sarai's voice was strained, her eyes fixed on the artifact. We could become just like them, like the Exethians. We could push ourselves to the brink of destruction. Leela's heart heavy with the weight of the decision ahead, she turned toward the anomaly, the device still humming ominously in the background. They'd already crossed a line, and now they had to choose whether to harness the same technology that had nearly destroyed the Exethian race. It was a moral crossroad. Lex, Lila said, her voice low but steady, I need a full analysis of the quantum anomaly. We need to know if we can shut it down before it gets worse. But the truth was, Leela wasn't sure anymore. The stakes had escalated beyond simple survival. The future of humanity and the galaxy was hanging in the balance. The Mistral systems hummed. The crew stood in the shadow of the artifact, facing the unknown. They could unlock the power of the Exethians or destroy themselves trying. The choice was theirs, but it was no longer a question of just surviving. It was a question of what kind of future they wanted to build. The Mistral floated motionless within the derelict Exethian warship, its crew working in tense silence. The artifact they'd uncovered hummed with an energy they could barely understand, an unsettling pulse that seemed to resonate with the very core of the ship. Leela stood in the command center, her eyes focused on the screens as the crew tried to analyze and manipulate the technology. But every move seemed to open new doors they weren't ready for. The tension grew with each passing second. Zane stood beside her, his eyes glued to the terminal in front of him. It's not just a weapon, Captain, he said quietly. It's a power source, a kind of energy field that before he could finish, there was a sudden jolt. The Mistral shuddered, as if it had been struck by an unseen force. Leela stumbled, catching herself on the console. Her heart raced, her instincts kicking in. Report? What happened? Lex, the ship's AI responded in a tense voice. Captain, the artifact appears to have triggered a quantum disturbance. It's affecting the fabric of reality itself. Leela's stomach dropped as she looked out the viewport. The stars outside were flickering, warping, bending as though they were being twisted by some unseen hand. Time itself seemed to stretch and compress, fragments of past, present, and future bleeding together. The ship's systems flashed red, alarms blaring as the Mistral was pulled into a swirling vortex, a rift that tore at the very fabric of space-time. "We're caught in a temporal distortion," Lex shouted, his voice distorted and crackling. "The rift is expanding. It's pulling us into multiple timelines. Crew members are experiencing visions. I cannot stabilize the core." Leela's mind raced. The crew, spread out across the ship, were already reacting. Some screamed in confusion, some wept in terror. Others stood frozen, staring at nothing. The rift was not just warping their surroundings, it was warping their perception of reality itself. ASA. The Mistral continued to be drawn into the anomaly. Lila saw something that made her blood run cold. In one moment, she saw Zane standing victorious in the halls of a human-controlled capital, the people cheering as humanity's flag was raised over a Exethian world. But in the blink of an eye, that vision shattered, replaced by another, the Mistral burning, its hull cracked open, her crew members scattered and lost, the galaxy a ruined husk of its former self. "Leela." Zane's voice broke through the haze, shaking. "What's happening?" "I'm seeing things. I saw humanity victorious, and then destroyed." Leela staggered, feeling the weight of it all. She could see the future, and yet she couldn't trust any of it. Was it real? Was it possible? What had the Exethians done to this ship and to their own reality? Then, another vision, a Exethian commander, long dead but now standing in front of her. The figure's form flickered like an old hologram, but the voice was unmistakable. "The rift is ours to control," it boomed. "You have opened the door to our victory. We will freeze your species in time, bind you to a single moment. You will never rise again." Leela's breath caught in her throat. The Exethians didn't just want to conquer, they wanted to control time itself, to trap humanity in a perpetual state of stasis, unable to ever evolve or challenge their dominance. The artifact, the rift, they were the key to turning the tide in the Exethians' favor. "Captain, we need to act now," Zane urged, his voice frantic. "The longer we stay here, the more we risk being lost to the rift. The longer we wait, the more unstable it becomes." Leela's hands tightened on the console. The crew was in chaos, the ship's systems on the brink of collapse. She had to make a decision, and she had to make it fast. The rift was growing, expanding, and it was clear that if they didn't shut it down soon, there would be no going back. "Lex," Lila said, her voice tight, "is there any way to close the rift without causing further damage?" "I can't stabilize the anomaly from here," Lex responded, his voice echoing with a hint of panic. "To close it, you would need to activate the ship's core at maximum power. The energy release will disrupt the anomaly, but, Captain, there's no guarantee you will survive the process. You'll need to initiate the sequence manually, and once the core is activated, there's no turning back." Leela's stomach twisted. The price of stopping the rift could be far more than they'd anticipated. She could see the crew's faces, some of them, like Zane, would volunteer in an instant. But it wasn't just the ship they were risking, it was time itself. If they failed, they might never exist again. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest like a physical force. They were at the precipice of something far larger than a simple battle. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about stopping an unstoppable force, a force that could erase them from history altogether. "Zane," Lila said, turning to him, her voice firm but shaken. "You're right. We have to act. Now." Zane nodded, his face grim. "What's the plan?" Leela closed her eyes for a brief moment, drawing in a deep breath. There was no more room for hesitation. She had led them this far, and now it was her turn to lead them through the end. "We'll initiate the core's overload. It'll destabilize the rift, but it's going to take all of us. I need you to get to the control center. Sarai, you're with me. Everyone else, prepare for the worst." The crew rallied together, each member moving with a purpose. They were no longer just survivors. They were the last line of defense against the unraveling of the galaxy. As Lila moved to the core chamber, her heart pounded in her chest. The ship, the crew, humanity, everything depended on the decision she was about to make. The rift was growing. The Exethians were coming. Time itself was unraveling. She had a choice: to sacrifice herself and the Mistral to close the rift, or to risk everything and hope that somehow the galaxy would survive. Leela took one last look at the ship's crew as they prepared for their final actions. She could feel the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. The choices they made now would determine the fate of humanity. The rift collapsed in a burst of blinding light, a seismic wave of energy that tore through the Mistral, ripping it apart in a catastrophic explosion of fire and metal. For a moment, everything was chaos, twisted chunks of the ship's hull disintegrating into the distorted fabric of space-time, shattered sections of the crew's quarters spinning into unknown dimensions. Leela felt the pulse of the ship's final moments, her own body yanked violently through the anomaly. She clutched the handrails, fighting to stay anchored to reality, to her crew, to the mission. And then, just as the energy was about to overwhelm them, it stopped. Silence followed, unnatural, all-encompassing silence. When Leela finally opened her eyes, she found herself standing alone on the shattered deck of what remained of the Mistral. Her heart pounded, her breath ragged, as she looked around at the devastation. The ship, once a proud symbol of humanity's might, was now a scattered mess of twisted debris and floating fragments. Yet, somehow, she was still alive. The stars beyond were unrecognizable. Space itself was different. It pulsed with an unfamiliar rhythm. But the worst part, the one thing she couldn't shake, was the absence of so many familiar faces. Zane? She whispered into the void, hoping against all hope that her first officer would appear from the shadows. But no one answered. She was alone. The few remaining crew members slowly stumbled into view, bruised, battered, but alive. Sarai Hall, the chief engineer, was kneeling next to the mangled remains of a control panel, her eyes wild with disbelief. "Captain, we did it," she muttered, her voice hoarse, almost mechanical. "The rift's closed, but the ship, it's gone." Leela felt her stomach drop as she surveyed the wreckage. The Mistral was barely recognizable. Yet, in this broken, disjointed corner of the galaxy, she knew something profound had happened, something that would change the universe. The Exethians were gone, retreating into the shattered fragments of their own timeline, but humanity's victory had come at a devastating price. The temporal fracture they had unleashed was not something that could be fixed or contained. The galaxy was in flux. Time itself had splintered. Worlds flickered in and out of existence, histories twisted, and realities bled into one another. "Where are we?" Leela asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happened?" Lex, the ship's AI, was the only constant in the fractured silence. The voice, once calm and composed, now sounded strained, distorted by the collapse of the anomaly. "Captain, we are no longer where we were. The rift's collapse has scattered us across multiple points in time. Some sections of the galaxy are centuries ahead. Others are lost to time entirely." Leela's gaze flicked to the remnants of the Mistral. She couldn't bring herself to look at it too long. They had sacrificed everything to stop the rift, to halt the Exethians' plans. But now, they were stranded, isolated in a broken, time-shattered world. "There's no going back," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Captain!" Zane's voice broke through, pulling Lila's attention away from the wreckage. He stood at the far edge of the ruined deck, staring into the swirling, broken space beyond. "I've been thinking." He hesitated, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "We can't just sit here. The Exethians, they've retreated for now, but this power, it's still here. We've unlocked something they never could. Something dangerous." Leela's heart sank as she understood what Zane was implying. The artifact, the rift, the knowledge they had now gained, it was more than a victory. It was a Pandora's box, and humanity had opened it wide. "We've learned how to manipulate time itself," Zane continued, his eyes dark with a strange hunger. This could be the key to humanity's survival. Imagine endless resources, the ability to change the past, to reshape our future. We could control the galaxy. Leela shook her head, disbelief and fear creeping into her chest. No, Zane. The Exethians were already doing this, pushing the limits of evolution and time manipulation. We can't become them. You're wrong, Zane shot back, his voice hardening. What we do now is up to us. We have the power, and we won't let it slip away. Leela stood frozen for a moment, contemplating Zane's words. It wasn't just a philosophical argument, it was a fight for the very soul of humanity. The Mistral had fallen apart, yes, but what they had uncovered, what they had gained, had the potential to reshape the entire galaxy. Could they wield that power responsibly? Or would they succumb to the same temptation that had destroyed the Exethians? Her thoughts were interrupted by a strange sensation, as though time itself was warping around them. Lex's voice crackled again. Captain, I've detected irregularities in the temporal fabric of this sector. Some worlds are advancing too quickly, others are stagnating. We cannot control these changes, but we may be able to stabilize them if we can control the rift's remnant. Leela felt the weight of her choices pressing on her like a physical force. If they didn't act, the galaxy would continue to break apart, each moment fragmenting further and further. But if they did act, they might become the very thing they fought against. She turned to the crew, their faces a mix of fear and determination. Some were ready to follow her lead. Others, like Zane, seemed eager to embrace the newfound power. But the question was clear. What was humanity's true place in this new universe? Leela took a deep breath, the weight of leadership heavy on her shoulders. We have two choices, she said, her voice steady but uncertain. We can try to fix what we've done. We can fight to bring some semblance of order to this fractured reality. Or we can use this power and risk everything. The crew stared at her, waiting for the final decision. Leela knew, deep in her gut, that humanity had passed a point of no return. The galaxy would never be the same, no matter what path they chose. But now, it was time to decide, would they rebuild or would they forge a new future, one where they stood at the center of time itself? The stars above shimmered, fractured, and endless. And with that, humanity's future, its true destiny, remained uncertain, hanging on the edge of an unfathomable precipice. The universe had changed. And now, humanity would either control it or be destroyed by it.